Okay. And I'm going to record it just to post it for kids who were absent. All right, so we're looking at doing the math for the ethanol density example. The first thing to do is actually to copy over the raw data table so that I have that raw data to work with. So I'm going to say data table 1, mass and volume measurements of samples of pure ethanol at room temperature. So we have measurement, mass of graduated cylinder, grams. I like that plus or minus sign, so I'm going to go up to the insert symbol, and this table pops up so I can pick that plus or minus. I think that looks nice. 1 grams. Somebody told me there was a fast set, what do you call those, shortcut keys to do that as well? I don't know what that is. It's like shift option plus or something. I never remember them, so I just go to the table. Shift option plus? Okay. And then the volume of ethanol milliliters. Well, that didn't work for me. I tried the shift option plus. It didn't work. Nope, didn't work. That's okay. 0.5 milliliters. All right. And then I have trial 1, trial 2, trial 3, trial 4, trial 5. Now, if you notice, these headers or these labels go into my cells where I want my data table. I don't like that. So I'm going to highlight those cells. And if you do the right mouse click, you get this pull-up menu. If you go to Format Cells, you go to Alignment, and then Wrap Text. That makes them go all in one cell. Now, that looks a little elongated, so if you go up to the header in Excel and get that little symbol, you can make them a little longer, and that looks a little nicer, right? Any questions on that? Guys, if you need to repeat anything that I've shown, please ask me, okay? All right, the other thing I like is I like it when my trials are in bold and they're centered. Okay. And then I typically will bold that as well. I also like it when I have little boxes around all my stuff. So I go and make the borders. We good? Anybody need any of that shown again? So now it's just a matter of typing in the data. Oh, that 5.0 just shows up as a 5. But it's important in the data table to show all the significant figures. So here's where you have to format that cell again. So again, it's the right mouse click, go to Format Cell. This time go to Number. So you want it to be a number and you want 1 decimal place. And then that'll put those tenths place in there if it's a 0. All right. Oops. Okay. And then I save it just in case something would happen to my computer and I would lose my data. So I save every now and then. So here's where I get out my calculations, my sample calculations. And what I tend to do is every time I calculate something, there's going to be an entry in the results table for it. So that I do include a fair number of my intermediate results because I think that helps people follow along in my math. And if I make a mistake, they're able to find it as well. So again, a table, so results table 1. I'm going to be calculating, let's see, mass, density, and uncertainty for the, I guess for pure ethanol. Oh. And that wrapped text, I don't want it to wrap text. So I'm going to go and just real quick format cells, alignment, and click off that wrap text box. Right. I'm going to do the 5 trials again. So I'm just going to copy that down here. You guys all good with that? Can you know that? What is that button? Command C and then Command V. And then following along from my sample calculations, the first thing I'm going to calculate is the mass of the ethanol. That'll be in grams. Then I calculated the density of the ethanol, grams. I had the uncertainty, of the mass. That was in grams. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that plus minus there. So it's plus minus grams for the uncertainty of the mass. Then I had the uncertainty of the density. And that was plus minus grams divided by milliliters. And actually, I had the percent uncertainty of the density first. And then I had the percent error. Uh-huh.
What if the density be in grams per millimeters?
Maybe. Sure, if you use the right units. Yes, thank you. I typically build those. I'm just going to move this over because they don't look too bad. That still looks okay. And then I'm going to make my boxes. Okay. You need any more time catching up, or can I keep going? Anybody need more time? Okay. So in this first box, we're going to put in the formula to calculate the mass of ethanol. And what we want to do is use the data in the table that's the same for each trial so that I can end up just copying those cells over and have Excel do the math for us. So the first thing I do is I use a plus sign to tell Excel that it is going to be a formula or a calculation. I believe you can also use an equal sign. And I want to get the mass of the ethanol, I'm going to take the mass of the graduated cylinder and the ethanol and subtract from that the mass of the graduated cylinder. Anybody need to see that again? You okay? Cool. All right, so I'll start over. You put the plus sign, and then you go and highlight, just click in the cell that is the graduated cylinder and the ethanol, and then say minus, and click in the cell that says the mass of the graduated cylinder. And then you hit return, and it does the math for you with those values in those two cells. We good? So in the density, again, I'm going to enter a plus sign or an equal sign to tell Excel that it's going to be a calculated value using values in other cells. Density is the mass of the ethanol. Well, we just calculated it in this cell, so I'm going to click in that cell the mass of the ethanol. And then I'm going to say divided by and use the value in the volume cell. I don't know if I said that right. And then hit return, and that should be the density that I calculated in my sample calculations. Okay. So now the uncertainty of the mass, looking at my sample calculations. Oh, you know what? That one was pretty easy, right? Because that was just the plus 0.02. But what I didn't have in my data table that I need is actually the percent uncertainty of the mass and the percent uncertainty of the volume, right? Oh, well, let's change this around then. So what I really meant here was the percent uncertainty of mass. And I need to add a row in here. So I'm going to highlight the entire row like that. Then I'm going to put my cursor in the highlighted row and hit that right mouse button again and just hit insert. And it inserts a row on top of the row that it was highlighted. Does anybody need to see that again? So here I meant to do the percent uncertainty of volume. Okay. Now for the percent uncertainty of the mass, I'll put a plus sign because it's going to be a calculation. They're all going to be 0.02 because that's the absolute uncertainty of that mass, divided by the mass. And then because it's a percent, it's times 100. Well, that's a lot of decimal points, isn't it? Okay. I don't want that many decimal points. Yes?
Can you do that again?
Sure. I'll do a plus because it's going to be a calculation. All of them have the same absolute uncertainty as 0.02. To get the percent, I'm going to take that absolute uncertainty divided by the mass. So I'm going to highlight that cell. And it's a percent, so I use the star times 100 because it's a percent. Okay? I am going to highlight all of these. Formatting bothers me, so I tend to do it as I come upon it. All right, I want all of those to have like 2 decimal places. So I'm just going to highlight those, right mouse key again, format cells, up to number, and then hit number and 2 decimal places. And then it'll make it pretty. All right, anybody need to see that again? So the uncertainty of the volume, again, it's going to be a calculation, so it's plus sign. All of them have the same absolute uncertainty. We're going to divide it by the volume and then multiply it by 100. And that should, all of these I'm checking to make sure that it agrees with my sample calculations that I've already done. For, sure. So doing it again, plus sign, volume, nope, I'm sorry, plus sign the absolute uncertainty for the volume, which was 0.5, divide by the volume, and times 100. And I did something wrong because it should be 10.
It should be 0.5.
Yep. Thanks. Okay. Then percent density is just these 2 added. So it'd be that plus that cell. So now I want to go back to an absolute uncertainty for my density. Again, it's going to be a calculation. And it's going to be that percentage uncertainty times the actual value for the density. And then divided by 100 to make that density into a decimal, that percentage into a decimal. Let me do that again. So it's a calculation with the plus sign. It's that percent uncertainty of the density times the density, and then divided by 100 because you got to convert the percent to a decimal. Okay? And that should agree with your calculation and your sample calcs. Okay. Anything you need to see? You good? You okay? All right, so now percent error. I've got to take an absolute value, right? So we get to use a function. Yes, that's so, it's exciting.
Yes.
It's okay. All right, Excel, if you look here, see this little button? There's all kinds of functions that Excel has for you. You can average things, you can sum things, but oh, look, this absolute function is the one I want. All right, so what you want to do in yours, you don't actually, it's at the top of mine because it's most recently used. But if you put equals and then all caps ABS and do a parentheses, all right, And what we're going to do is just that experimental minus the actual over the actual. Okay, but anyway, so the absolute value, and because I'm taking a subtraction, I'm going to do that subtraction in another set of parentheses. My theoretical yield was calculated as part of the lab, and my theoretical, or it was given in this problem, wasn't it? So it's 0.789. From that, I want to subtract my experimental density, and then I'm going to divide that by the accepted value. That's where I close the parentheses because that's what I want to take the absolute value of. And then I need to multiply by 100. And that should be the same percent error that you calculated in your math, all right? Okay, so looking at this, you should be able to look at that formula. If you need me to go through the steps again, I'm more than willing. Okay, so now we have, no? I can help you in a sec too, because this is the last part. So now I've got all of those calculations, the equations and everything in this trial 1. Okay, and because this raw data table is set up in the same way, I can highlight all of what I've just done. See that little square in the bottom? You want to highlight it until yours looks like that. Push your mouse key down and drag it across the remaining trials. And it does all of the calculations for you. This is ugly. Okay, looking real quick, I just need to reformat or format the cells here so that it gives me 2 decimal places. And take a quick glance through your values. And one thing that I noticed was if you look at this uncertainty of the density for that trial 5, it says there is none. Well, there probably is, but if you look at the uncertainty, it decreases across my trials because my sample sizes were getting larger. So if I highlight that one, and I'm going to just reformat it so that it gives me 3 decimal places, and then you see you do have some kind of uncertainty. Now, it kind of goes against the general rule of thumb that uncertainty should end in the same decimal place as your density. But what I'm going to do is, in this table here, I'm going to put a little asterisk, and I'm just going to note that I'm going to say the uncertainty for trial 5 adjusted. Okay. Just to let who's ever looking at my lab report know that I realize that I'm kind of 1 decimal place more, but it seems silly to say that there was absolutely no uncertainty in that value. All right? Any questions? All right, so reason why I wanted to step through this is, 1, because I don't take it for granted that you guys have the Excel skills necessary. I think it depends on what other classes that you take. And I want you to be able to use I want that bolded, Excel in the lab that is due next Wednesday. So if we take a look, okay, This is posted in Schoology under the lab folder. For the magnesium oxide lab, I do want the report printed, and I want a hard copy turned in. It should be typed except for the sample calculations. Show the chemical equations for all the reactions in the lab. You should read the lab because it's pretty much all in there. For your sample calculations for your trial, your data should be trial 1. I'm going to give you the class set of data in just a moment. It's a handout with the idea that you're going to retype in the values, putting your trial first. Your sample calculations should be done by hand. They should be logically presented with headers labeling what it is you're doing in the calculation. In your calculations, I do need you to calculate what your experimental empirical formula is for the magnesium oxide and the percent yield of the magnesium oxide. You should do uncertainty calculations for just the yield of the magnesium oxide. Please don't do it for the empirical formula. It's pretty hard to figure out how to do that. Complete the calculations for all the other trials using Excel. Have a properly formatted and titled Excel table. That should be a printout included with your lab. I want a first draft conclusion. Claim, evidence, reasoning. I want one for the empirical formula results. That should be no more than 3 to 4 sentences. I want one for the percent yield calculations. Again, no more than 3 to 4 sentences. And then I want you to just identify one source of possible error. What might have made your yield high, what might have made it low. Just one sentence. That's it. Okay? I expect the all but the last 2 points, meaning that draft conclusion, I expect all of that to be very well done. All right? I think you're set up to do so. The conclusion and the error, there's a reason why I'm calling it a draft. All right? Any questions? All right, that's all I've got. I'll give you the data table.